recently France has become more vocal about sending their troops to the war in Ukraine. And the thing is, I don't think that they're kidding. Welcome to OK Hi. If you guys want to support the channel, make sure you hit the like button on the video as well as in the link tree. Go check out the other YouTube, the News Dude YouTube, where debates are posted. And if you want to support the channel, since we're not monetized on either one of these, there is a Patreon in that description as well if you guys want to support. So France seems to have taken a complete 180 from their initial stance, was to more or less be a mediator, a broker, a negotiator to Russia, and take that stance. And it seems like France has abandoned that and is instead contemplating direct action in Russia, or at least operating in a logistical capacity or something to that effect. But it seems like their entire calculus on the war in Ukraine has shifted. I think that what's clearly happening is they view this war as we stop Russia now or we stop them later in a full-fledged direct conflict. I think that's pretty evident because Russia, in spite of getting absolutely destroyed in Ukraine, has continued to take the position of we're going to advance in other directions as well. And that should be a bit concerning. You have a leader that does not particularly believe in self-preservation and certainly believes that the advancement into the former Soviet bloc is going to be important for survival of Russia. And so you have a country that is predicating their future on the premise that they're going to take back land and be able to influence in a very czarist Russia way the Soviet bloc. France, and even to a degree the UK, is taking a very serious approach that this is going to devolve into a much larger conflict if we cannot get Ukraine what they need to win the war. Coinciding with all of this, you have a problem within the EU and have for some time about who the leader of the EU is going to be. Who is going to be the country that takes charge and largely directs policy for Europe? And it seems like France wants that part. There was a question about whether or not it would be Germany under Angela Merkel, but obviously because of World War II and the things that happened there, Germany being a leader of Europe is a bit suspect. There's also the economic ramifications of Russia taking over Ukraine. There's the energy ramifications. There is the food ramifications. And these things negatively influence them, as well as France and other Western countries have quite a bit of tech business that goes on in Ukraine. You can see that France is becoming increasingly worried, which is interesting because France historically has taken a much more, especially in the last however many years, a much more diplomatic approach. If you look at the war in Iraq, France was one of the only countries that was completely against it. So for them to be taking this stance, in spite of what will be public pressure, is pretty significant. Right now, though, there's a problem. Western nations are arguing about what the best way to handle this situation is, what the best way going forward is. We just watched what happened to Ukraine as the United States cut off funding and Ukraine lost the Diivka, right? And essentially what happened is we weren't able to get them to surface-to-air missiles. Russia, as of November of last year, started running sorties back in Avdiivka. And what was effectively a no-fly zone, Russia ran about 600 sorties over the course of about 5 months. So France is very concerned in this regard that Russia is going to become a problem in the future, and especially because they don't really have any care for what happens to them other than they have to take this country. France is getting increasingly concerned. Russia has talked about taking over the Baltics as well as Poland, and the effect of this will be pretty significant. I mean, if you could imagine where not just invoking an Article 5 of NATO, which is NATO has to respond if a NATO country is involved, but if Poland, just generally speaking, if NATO didn't even exist, if Poland or the Baltic states were invaded, it would almost certainly spark a full-blown conflict, just without even factoring in NATO, because these countries are significant to the future of Europe. But you have significant disagreements going on right now with essentially France and the states that are more aligned with it, like the UK, and Germany and America, that have very much played this very cautious role. Will trickle in this weaponry, will trickle in this tech, will allow it to be effective, and see how Russia reacts to it. And the problem is that Russia has not taken any steps to target Western countries militarily as a result of those things. So essentially, it just seems like we're using this war in Ukraine to test out the stability of Russia and how it's going to react, which seems incredibly counterproductive. But the Biden administration, Scholz, they're of Germany, they're taking this position where we need to be super cautious. And France is saying, look, if we're cautious, we're going to end up in a direct conflict. If we're not cautious, if we take more risks, we're less likely to. But if we don't intervene, if Ukraine is about to fall, we will absolutely be in a larger conflict with them, which is pretty concerning. And the United States, after the 6 months or so of not funding, we've seen the effect of what this has done to Ukraine. It's been a significant effect. And but yeah, we've seen what this has done to Ukraine. It's been significant. They've lost Avdiivka. They've lost a lot more men. And the concern is you have a presidential candidate coming in Donald Trump that now wants to get rid of this war. He wants to end it, which could result in a serious, catastrophic geopolitical issue and consequences for decades. If it doesn't result in a war, for decades. There is concern, though, and has been by Western nations about escalation, about nuclear weapons being used, to which I think that Macron has seen enough now that their calculus is they're not going to use them. And I think that with the military equipment that we've sent to Ukraine, the calculus is not really sure if Russia can even get a ballistic missile past our defense systems. We saw with the defense systems, the 30-year-old Patriot systems did to the brand new Kinzhal, supposedly hypersonic missiles, and every single one of them was shot down in Ukraine. So it's not like they're particularly advanced. They would be shooting ballistic missiles that are significantly older. And the West is more than likely confident that this is not going to result in a full-fledged shootout. And even if it did, that they could intercept enough missiles that it would not be an issue. But I do want to read this part. This was from an article out of Foreign Affairs. And I give credit where credit's due here. It was called Europe, but not NATO, should send troops to Ukraine by Alex Crowther, Jahara Matseki, and Philip O'Brien. And they make an incredible point in here that I think is key to understanding France's calculus. Quote, tellingly, the countries that are most likely to be targeted by a nuclear attack, those that border Russia, particularly Poland and the Baltic states, are the least concerned about that prospect, but rightfully fear the aggression of a reconstituted conventional Russian military buoyed by success in Ukraine. And I think that is an important piece. The countries that are the ones that are most likely to be shot at in terms of nuclear weapons, that have the least ability to defend themselves, they're not concerned. In fact, Poland is calling for military intervention in Ukraine. They've been the first ones to call for it, saying, we're going to go in there if you guys don't do something. And this posturing by France and by Poland is important, right? Whether or not they're serious about them, which is yet to be determined. I think that they are, but whether or not they're serious about them, this posturing by them to the West signals you need to listen to us, right? You're not doing enough. And we will absolutely get involved if you get cold feet. And this is signaling to the Biden administration, at least, that you need to act in a more serious capacity. We need to get Ukraine what they want. It doesn't matter how upset Russia's going to be, because if we do nothing, if we don't do enough, we're going to end up in a conflict anyways. So it's a catch-22 in that regard. I think that France is serious about this. I think that generally speaking, us sending troops to Ukraine is a bad idea, unless that's the only option that you have. Because if it's Kiev's going to fall and we're going to end up in a future conflict anyways, might as well intervene to prevent that future conflict as best as we can, or at least make the likelihood of it being successful for Russia as less significant as we can. Ukraine has to get equipment. Ukraine needs better tech. We need to stop trickling them in weapons and give them what they need to win the war. If Russia wants to continue the war to their own detriment, that is what it is. But I'm a bit skeptical of sending in troops there. But one of the things that I am convinced on is that the United States needs to send more tech, that we need to be more involved in this, because as it sits right now, Russia has shown that they're going to continue this war to their own detriment, because not continuing the war is to their own detriment. So I'll keep you guys updated if there are any changes, but it's my initial take on it.